Hi, I'm Assistant Chief Officer David Farries. It's coming through really loud and clear that people do believe that this is purely driven by finances and it's a cuts agenda. And I've been really consistent to say that that is not the case. We get a budget settlement from the Scottish Government, and it is imperative that we use that money wisely. We've got a huge amount of data to make changes to the service based on matching our operational resource to risk and demand, and we would want to go through that process regardless of the financial challenges that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service faces. When we go through the process of matching operational resource to risk and demand, there are a number of factors that are looked at, and clearly we've considered various elements in modelling to make the proposals that we think are appropriate at this time. As part of that, we also look at resilience and we look at how we would service incidents. So we need to maintain not the bottom level that the modelling might show us, but enough capacity in the system to ensure that we can attend and move our resources around as appropriate to deal with major incidents. Where there's a proposal for an appliance to be permanently withdrawn, it's because our research, our data and our modelling tells us that that resource could be withdrawn. So in certain areas we have proposed a day shift duty system to do work in the community, but in other areas that's not required because we're covering that type of work in other ways. Risk is really complex, but in effect there have been so many changes over the years that simply to suggest that an increase in population or an increase in housing constitutes more risk is wrong. Things like the changes to the building standards, the way that buildings are built, the road infrastructure are all factors in what we would get in terms of incident activity. Houses are built now, some with sprinklers, some with all with hard-wired smoke detection, and so all the things that we are currently doing around about our prevention work in the current housing stock is being built in at source in new build housing. So for us, an increase in housing, an increase in population in an area doesn't necessarily immediately mean that there's an increase in the risk. I think what's really important to understand is that for time in memoriam, risks have changed, and that's really what a lot of this service delivery review is predicated on. We understand that the types of risk that existed in the 50s, 60s, 70s have changed, but they're being replaced in some cases with new risk. A great example is the battery energy storage sites, and that's something that comes up repeatedly in terms of people's questions. We understand that those are built to a standard. We understand that those are in areas where there isn't a huge amount of population, but we also understand that they're very safe, and we don't see a huge amount of incidents happening across the UK in battery energy storage sites. But we do consider it, and we do have the data, and we do understand what the likelihood and probability of incidents is at this time in those types of venues. So yes, we consider emerging risk, and we are looking to bolster our training resource to make sure our firefighters also understand those risks. %80 of Scotland is covered by on-call firefighters. The suggestion that having no whole-time resource puts people at additional risk is wrong. We know that we have areas that are covered by on-call, and that's absolutely sufficient for the level of risk and demand in those areas. Firefighters in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service are all trained to the same standard. And I think it's really important to understand that our hugely committed staff in the on-call provide fantastic availability across Scotland. In fact, over 80% of Scotland is covered by on-call firefighters. So they respond day, nights and weekends, and they don't provide a lesser service to the communities. can absolutely assure people that these decisions haven't been made. Clearly, we've brought forward a number of proposals that have had a significant amount of work go into them and a significant amount of background data gathered and modelling done to ensure that we believe that they're viable options. But ultimately, we're going through a public consultation process to hear what the public think of these particular proposals. And those will be presented back to the board of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service in December for a final decision. That's a criticism we've heard before in terms of why were these changes not made earlier in the lifetime of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. We spent a long time bringing the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service together from the 8 legacy services, and really this is our first opportunity, given the work that we've been doing over a number of years to gather data and information, to be really informed about the changes that we want to make to the service to make it fit for the future. So it's taken a while, but we've been very measured in our approach to this, and it's now the right time to make these changes. We'll go through the process of public consultation. We'll take all comments into account, and ultimately there will be a decision to make for the board of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and that will be the decision. As part of the options that are currently out to public consultation, there is a proposal for a new fire station. However, specifically for the north of Scotland, where we do see wildfires, we need to consider how we can best resource those types of incidents. And that's been a challenge to try and articulate how liberating resource from, for example, the central belt can benefit these wildfires in the north of Scotland. But it's how we use that resource and where we deploy that resource from. We don't require to go to public consultation to add a resource, and therefore it's absolutely appropriate that we would look at areas of the north of Scotland where we might be able to bolster our current fire and rescue service resource in those areas. All the proposals that have been put forward through public consultation have been run through our modelling. And what it allows us to do is it allows us to see the interaction between appliances at neighbouring stations. So that's one element from an operational perspective and a response perspective that's been considered. What's also been considered is the non-emergency workload that exists in those stations. So our prevention activity, our training, our gathering of operational intelligence, and all the things that we do to make sure firefighters are safe. And we've also assessed that type of workload to make sure that that's sustainable amongst neighbouring stations.